We live in interesting times. Today's stories. Russia is skeptical over UN Syrian Crimes Against Humanity report. Hungarian NGO comments on the recent legislation on migrant aid. UK vows simple registration for EU citizens after Brexit. President Trump orders an end to family separations. Hundreds protest in Manhattan on World Refugee Day. Mexico president condemns the cruel treatment of migrants. Plus, Las Vegas Fire and Rescue Training Center holds its first community emergency response team exercise. Hello everyone, I am Eliza Gonzalez Manglikmot, bringing you stories from around the globe. And this is Eagle News, Washington, D.C. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says he is skeptical about a UN report accusing the Syrian regime of committing crimes against humanity during the siege of eastern Ghouta. The report published Wednesday said forces loyal to the government had deliberately starved civilians during the siege between February and April, among other crimes.
Мы, в принципе, очень скептически относимся к дистанционным методам такого рода работы, будь то военные преступления в целом, будь то применение химического оружия. Мы уже не раз комментировали те способы, которыми подобного рода сенсации зачастую делаются.
When questioned by journalists, Lavrov confirmed he had not seen the report. He said it was based on data obtained through social networks, video that was filmed by witnesses, rather than being put together on the ground. The 5-year siege on the outskirts of the capital ended in April when Damascus regained control of the rebel enclave. The UN-commissioned report said as pro-government forces dramatically escalated their campaign to recapture the besieged enclave, they used tactics that were largely unlawful in nature. The tactics, it said, aimed at punishing the inhabitants of eastern Ghouta and forcing the population collectively to surrender or starve. Russia has been involved in Syria's civil war since September 2015. Its military support of the regime changed the course of the war, allowing government troops to retake more than half the country from rebels and the Islamic State group. More than 350,000 people have been killed in Syria's war since it started in 2011 with the brutal repression of anti-government protests. The co-chair of the Hungarian Helsinki Committee Human Rights NGO comments on the recent legislation which penalizes migrant aid groups.
I think this is the first, in fact, as far as I can recall, where the Hungarian government has basically said, I don't care about appearances either. I'm just going ahead because I can. There's nothing to limit me. And I think it's very important, this attitude, because it's contrary to what the European Union is about. Another thing, of course, aside from the political responses, is the legal responses. And here the European Commission is key. And I think it's very clear that this legislation adopted yesterday contravenes European Union asylum law, European Union migration law, and also the Fundamental Charter, the human rights constitution, in a way, of the EU. It limits freedom of expression, it limits freedom of association, and therefore there's a lot of things the European Commission should be doing now, particularly and primarily to launch an infringement procedure as soon as possible. I wasn't shocked anymore because the shock, of course, it comes in waves and it subsides, and as a Hungarian human rights defender, I think we have to be prepared for a long haul of many, many shocks. To sustain that, we need to be resilient. So when I see people who say they're afraid for me, I always reassure them that they should be afraid for all of us rather than just, human rights defenders.
Hungary's parliament adopted Wednesday a controversial package of laws penalizing NGOs that help migrants, a key proposal of the firebrand nationalist Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Dubbed the Stop Soros laws after liberal U.S. billionaire George Soros, accused by the government of orchestrating migration to Europe. The package of legislation was voted through by 160 votes to 18. The laws will bring in a punishment of up to a year in prison for anyone convicted of helping a person who entered Hungary illegally from outside the Schengen zone and whose life wasn't in immediate danger. MPs also approved a change to the Constitution, stipulating that no authority is allowed to affect the makeup of the Hungarian population, a clause designed to prevent Hungary participating in any EU scheme for mandatory refugee resettlement. The measures passed Wednesday include a constitutional obligation for all state institutions to defend Christian culture, as well as a ban on homeless people spending the night in public spaces. The latest changes come in addition to a measure passed with a finance bill on Tuesday, slapping a 25% tax on NGOs suspected of helping migrants. Ministers said Thursday as they vowed to make the process as simple as possible, European Union citizens living in Britain can begin registering this autumn for a post-Brexit settlement scheme. Almost 4 million EU nationals currently live in Britain with no restrictions under the bloc's freedom of movement laws. But this will end with Brexit when they must apply for a new status. Unveiling further details of the plan, Interior Minister Zahid Javid said registering will be as simple as people can reasonably expect and would have no income requirement. Applicants will only have to prove their identity, that they live in Britain, and that they have no serious criminal convictions, and there will be no minimum income requirement. The government agreed a deal with Brussels in December to allow EU citizens and their relatives to stay after Brexit. But many have complained about the uncertainty that remains over whether they can stay or not, as well as the burden of red tape and the cost of applying. Applications will be able to be made online with minimal documentation, and Javid said the expectation would be that everyone was eligible. Britain is leaving the EU in March next year, although freedom of movement will continue during an implementation period that ends in December 2020. Europeans who have lived in Britain for 5 years by that point will be eligible for settled status, granting indefinite leave to remain. Newer arrivals will register to pre-settled status, which will allow them to stay for a further 5 years and in the future apply for settled status. The scheme will start in autumn but be fully functional by March, with a deadline for applications set for June 30, 2021. Javid admitted that registering everyone in time was a challenge, saying his department's casework team would increase from 700 to over 1,500 people. The ministry also confirmed that carers, stay-at-home parents, retired people, and students were all eligible, while the cost will be similar to that of a passport, £65 or 74 euros or $86. Immigration Minister Caroline Noakes said EU citizens make a huge contribution to the economy and to the society.
EU citizens will be asked to demonstrate their identity, their residency, and indeed to declare any criminality. We want them to stay. This sets out very clearly their rights and how those who have been here 5 years will immediately be eligible for settled status. Those who have been here less than 5 years will be able to apply for pre-settled status and accrue the 5 years. I do not underestimate the scale of the challenge in successfully processing what may exceed 3.5 million applications. But the Home Office already issues around 7 million passports and 3 million visas each year. And so processing applications on the scale required is not new to us.
Up next, President Trump orders an end to family separations. Hundreds protest in Manhattan on World Refugee Day. Mexico president condemns the, quote, cruel treatment of migrants. Eagle News, Washington, D.C. will return in a moment. Welcome back. You are watching Eagle News, Washington, D.C. President Donald Trump addresses a rally in Minnesota after ordering an end to the separation of migrant children from their parents on the U.S. border, reversing a tough policy under heavy pressure from his fellow Republicans, Democrats, and the international community.
Today, I signed an executive order. We're going to keep families together, but the border is going to be just as tough as it's been. Democrats don't care about the impact of uncontrolled migration on your communities, your schools, your hospitals. Illegal immigration costs our country hundreds of billions of dollars. So imagine if we could spend that money to help bring opportunity to our inner cities and our rural communities and our roads and our highways and our schools. We need people to help, but we want them to come in through the merit system, not a system where we get MS-13 and everybody else that other countries don't want.
The spectacular about-face comes after more than 2,300 children were stripped from their parents and adult relatives after illegally crossing the border since May 5 and placed in tent camps and other facilities with no way to contact their relatives. Pictures and accounts of the separation sparked outrage and a rebellion among Republicans in Trump's own party, as well as international accusation that the U.S. was committing human rights violations. Trump said that even with a change, border enforcement will be equally tough, if not tougher. For weeks, Trump had insisted he was bound by the law to split the children from their parents and that only Congress could resolve the problem before he shifted gears. Trump said, quote, "We want security for our country, and we will have that. At the same time, we will have compassion. We want to keep families together." The order says the Department of Homeland Security and not the Justice and Health and Human Services departments, as under previous policy, would have continuing responsibility for the families. It also suggests the government intends to hold the families indefinitely by challenging an existing statute, the 1997 Flores settlement, that places a 20-day limit on how long children, alone or with their parents, can be detained. That move could lead to new legal battles for the administration. Trump said there was a need to sustain his zero-tolerance policy to prevent crime, for which he blames illegal immigrants. Hundreds of New Yorkers mark World Refugee Day by marching through Manhattan, past the United Nations, and stopping in front of the Trump World Tower, yelling "shame" to express their opposition to the Trump administration's immigration policy.
Trump apparently signed an executive order that says he's no longer separating families a couple of hours ago, but he's still detaining them, and he's still going to detain families, whether it's together or apart. It's unfair, and that's not how we treat human beings.
I think we're making a statement to the President of the United States. We're making a statement to the city of New York, to all the people who will see us as we're marching, that there are people in this country who don't agree with the actions of our government, and that we support people who are trying to come here just like my ancestors did, just like so many of our ancestors did.
As I say here, one refugee without hope is too many, because we all as one, and our voices matter. That's what I want to say.
America is founded on being a place for freedom, and in order to really fulfill that ideal of freedom, we need to be a place where people can come and be free.
Mexico President Enrique Peña Nieto condemns, quote, all cruel and inhuman treatment of Mexican migrants after the U.S. government reversed a policy that led to the separation of migrant children from their parents on the U.S. border.
México ha expresado su más enérgica condena a cualquier trato cruel e inhumano hacia cualquier migrante, en especial hacia aquellos más vulnerables como son niñas y niños.
Coming up, Las Vegas Fire and Rescue Training Center holds its first Community Emergency Response Team exercise. Eagle News, Washington, D.C. will return shortly. This is Eagle News, Washington, D.C. I am Eliza Gonzalez Manglekmont. How prepared are you to help after a major disaster? EBC's Anna Cui takes us to the first full-scale Community Emergency Response Team exercise event in Las Vegas, where individuals undergo training on how to properly respond to unexpected situations. Anna?
What would you do if a major disaster happens in your city? Are you prepared to help your family and those around you into safety? Well, I'm here at the Las Vegas Fire and Rescue Training Center, where they are holding Southern Nevada's first full-scale Community Emergency Response Team exercise. The day started in the classroom, where the volunteers had a review of selected topics from the CERT curriculum. But this is not an ordinary CERT refresher course. Today, they're doing something new for the very first time.
So what is happening here today is our first CERT, Community Emergency Response Team exercise for Southern Nevada for people who have been through our CERT classes. So these are people who have been through the 6-week course or the weekend course, and this is an exercise to help them brush up their skills, see if how they handle some of the new material we taught them. The CERT program, it's either a 6-week course or a weekend course, whichever fits your schedule. Teaches people basic fire suppression, cribbing, basic first aid, some disaster psychology. So just basic skills that people would need in the event of a major disaster, so you can help your friends, your families, or your neighbors in the event that first responders are taxed and can't quite get there in a timely fashion.
About 70 CERT volunteers were able to put into practice what they learned during a simulated plane crash scenario. According to DeMarco, they were tested on assessing the situation, looking at the victims' injuries, and prioritizing who needed help first. Complete with stage victims under rubbles, first aid treatment areas, and the help of professional first responders, this full-scale CERT exercise was appreciated by those who took part in it.
I thought it was great. It's kind of a learning experience, playing victim, and we're on the other side and we're the ones trying to help save lives.
It was very good, very educational, very, very well done. They did a good job of organizing it. I think if more of us are educated in what to do in a disaster, there'll be less chaos, less panic.
I think that they should go through the course, even though it's 18 hours. 3 hours a day, 6 times, and it's worth it. Just if you save your family, it's worth it.
The CERT concept was developed by the Los Angeles Fire Department in 1985 and was made available nationally by FEMA since 1993. Reporting for Eagle News, I'm Anna Cui, and I am 1 with 25.
Thanks, Anna. That is today's Eagle News, Washington, D.C. Join us tomorrow for the weekend edition. Visit our websites at Eaglenews.PH and EagleNewsLive.com. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at Twitter.com/EagleNewsPH. Thank you for watching. I am Eliza Gonzalez Manglekmont, always 1 with 25.